So, hello TIFO members. Today we are doing Adam Turley's suggestion. Thank you very much for that, Adam Turley. Montreal Impact. See, I've written it out here. Montreal Impact obviously are going to start playing in the MLS new season, which begins right at the beginning of March. So all of this stuff is going off how they played last season under new manager Remy Gard. It was Gard's first season in charge. He'd been out of work for about 18 months following a period at Aston Villa that did not go well. There were various reasons for that. If you look at Villa fans, they'll say that there were fallings out with key players like Jack Grealish, Gabriel Bougnlahor. There was an issue with Jonas Okori, who was a very good Danish defender who was brought in. And basically, Remy Gard, having established a great reputation in Lyon, imploded at Villa. It didn't work out. 18 months out of work. Now he's back at Montreal Impact, and he's created really quite an exciting side. So if you look at it, first of all, what I've done is I've highlighted some of the key players. So here we've got Ignacio Piatti. Now Piatti plays on the left wing. He can also play as a centre forward. Piatti is really good. He's very exciting, very attacking, very creative. We'll come back to him. Alejandro Silva. Now Alejandro Silva was a key man last season. He's actually been sold to Olimpia Asuncion back in Paraguay. It's a team he's played for before. He was on loan there and he was there earlier in his career as a full-time player. So this is going to be a key area for Montreal Impact coming into this season. Who's going to take on the Silva role and will they be as effective? In midfield, there are two crucial guys. Safir Taida, who's on loan until the end of the 18-19 season from Bologna. Well, it's kind of 1920 season in MLS terms, from Bologna. And this guy, Samuel Piette, who is Canadian. Piette is a really, really solid defensive midfielder. And as we'll see when we come to look at the defensive shape and the defensive structure, which is absolutely key to how Montreal play, this is the key guy. He's the one who sets the tone, organises the press, and basically runs this midfield area. Out here on the left, at left back, we've got Lovitz. Now, Montreal recruited quite heavily last season, and you have players like Rod Fanny, who's ex of Marseille with a couple of French caps. Bakary Sagna came in. But basically, this kind of defensive area, there was quite a lot of change in terms of the personnel. Lovitz was kind of the guy who really stuck in. He's an American, and he provides a lot of width coming up from left back. So, Montreal Impact, if you were to sum them up in one kind of style, it would be counter-attacking. Now, in order to counter-attack, first of all, you have to be able to defend. So we're just going to look very briefly at how Montreal Impact defend. Now, one of the key things to say about them is that they have a very clear defensive shape, very clear defensive structure. That doesn't mean they're good at defending. And one of the key problems that they have, and one of the reasons that the Impact hasn't done as well or didn't do as well last season as it should have done when it was sort of chasing for playoff places throughout most of the season, only falling down to the New England Revolution 1-0 last day of the season, is that one-on-one and also particularly defending from set pieces, they are poor. Part of what they therefore seek to do is to mitigate this. So, basic defensive shape, they start out in a 4-3-3, pretty orthodox 4-3-3, with wide attacking midfielders that like to cut inside, central midfielders who variously get forwards up and down into support, and a kind of anchor man here. When the opposition have the ball, these guys fall back. And the striker will sort of press, but will also look to tuck back and try and keep a position here to prevent any sort of easy bringing the ball forward, by the opposition centre backs or by the goalkeeper. It's not a massively active press though, until you get to about this sort of area. And what's quite interesting at this point is that the Impact keep a sort of 4-1-4-1 shape, and it's this guy in the centre, Piette, who does the aggressive pressing. So he'll push forwards a lot to try and stop the opposition from having the time to pick through balls. Montreal are aware that their weakness is when teams play through the lines against them. So a really good example of this is when they got beaten 4-1 by Atlanta United. For a long time, that game was in stalemate because Montreal were very, very good at compacting this space here, tucking in at the sides and basically creating a really compact defensive 9 here with the striker kind of loitering. And until Miguel Almiron, who's now transferred to Newcastle United, started to move across to the side and create space in between the lines, Atlanta United were really, really struggling. That game was a draw for a long, long period of time. Atlanta then scored, I think, 3 goals in the last 10 minutes because Almiron was able to assert himself. But they will look to compress. And the only person who really breaks that when they're in their 2 solid lines of 4 is Piet, bursting forwards, trying to close it down. What Montreal want to do is force the ball into these wide spaces and win turnovers, and as soon as they win turnovers, although we'll talk properly about how they attack later on, these guys are straight back up the pitch. So it's all about creating a block. It's kind of like there are some sort of similarities, I think, between how the Impact played and how Borussia Dortmund played last season under Peter Stöger when he took over. It's not a massively engaged press. It's about creating a big kind of solid block here, pressing a little bit in the wide spaces, a standard pressing trigger of when you see the opposition passing backwards, but they want to be compact, they want to be solid, and then they want to spring forwards. That's basically how they defend, and it's going to lead in to how they attack. So we're back here, and now we're going to look at how Montreal Impact attack, using again this kind of high-tech setup that we've got here.
We are getting something.
What?
We're getting a tactics board.
We are going to get a tactics board.
We're getting a tripod.
I've not even bothered to write the player names in now.
No.
So, Montreal Impact, in very simple terms, are a counter-attacking team. It's what they're very, very good at. And part of the reason they're very good at it is Piatti and Silva. So these are 2 quick, skillful players who are really, really adept at finding space. And the way they do this is to invite the opposition onto them, and then when they win the ball back, they're looking to do one of 2 things. The first and most straightforward thing is that, let's say that this is Piatti. Well, we'll get a different one here. So Piatti's now green in a defensive posture, right? This is Piatti. And Lovitz here has won the ball. So as soon as he wins the ball, Piatti is straight on his bike, and they're just looking to pop a direct pass in there to his run, or it'll be a shift inside and then another direct pass here. It's very, very kind of, I don't want to say route 1 because that's a bit, offensive possibly, but this is what they do. They're always looking to hit the space. Now, quite a lot of teams in MLS draw their width from their fullbacks. So you'll find, for example, in the game that the Impact actually lost against New England Revolution, the Revolution were playing a kind of diamond midfield, and so the fullbacks were having to get high in support. What that means is when you've got very quick players out wide and you win the ball back, if those players are immediately attuned to the space in behind that fullback and are looking to hit it, as long as they got the stamina to keep doing it, then it can be successful. This is one of the reasons, incidentally, why Montreal Impact don't press that aggressively in midfield. It's because they particularly want these wide guys to be fit enough to push forward straight away on the counter-attack, and if you're constantly pressing, that's quite hard to do. This guy here, Zafir Taider, who was, I think, scored the 2nd most goals for them that season, he also gets forward a lot. These 2, Piet and towards the end of the season it was Azira, they don't get forward quite as much, but he will get forward a little bit as well. The wide players, they will stay wide or they'll cut inside. It's very, very situational. They're both players who've got a kind of license to come in field and drive at the opposition goal. However, if midfield are getting forward in numbers, they will also do that. They'll look to cut wide and pull back. So once they get into the attacking phase, it's not that there's not a kind of plan to how the Impact attack under Remy Gard. It's more that these 2 players particularly have a real degree of creative license to kind of make stuff happen. The other thing that they'll look to do, which is quite clever, is these players, and this is going to get a little confused, so what I'll do is I'll just get rid of a couple of these lines. I mean, this really is like Monday Night Football, isn't it? So let's say that the centre back has won the ball here for the impact, this guy. What he's going to do is he's going to play a pass to Tyder here. And as soon as that pass has been received by Tyder, bearing in mind that he's facing his own goal at this point, he's going to knock it straight back to Piet. And as soon as he's done that, he's off. What Impact like to do is to use Piet or the centre-backs, and again, this is a kind of Peter Stöger at Dortmund thing. These guys will quite often play the ball between them or using the fullbacks to progress it. These front five always need to be facing forwards when the Impact are attacking, because what they're always looking to do is burst onto through balls and attack the space, and you can't see the space in the defensive line unless you're looking at it. It's a statement of the obvious, but it is true. You know, a lot of players who play with their back to the opposition line, they're not going to know where to burst off, they're not going to know where the covering defenders are. So everything is geared towards initially getting the ball in a kind of safe way in this central area, and then have these five, the two central midfielders, the wide players and the striker, all then turning and bursting forwards like this, but crucially all facing that way. Then Piet, who is the key man defensively and kind of is the key man in an attacking sense before you start getting to Piatti and Silva and these guys, he can then pick his pass and he's looking to loft it out here, or he's looking for Lovitz on the overlap, but he basically controls when that happens. What's really interesting about him as well, Piet, he's a very, very good player, is that if he sees that this isn't happening, then he's quite happy to recycle the ball. So that's when it'll go back and the Impact will keep the ball quite happily in their half until there's enough movement up here. Again, think Dortmund last season with Stöger, where you've got people like Royce and Sancho and Pulisic, boom, 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 up and down, trying to move, trying to create space, and then when the opportunity arises, that's when the hit comes, that's when the long forward pass comes in, and then players like Piatti, Silva, who will need to be replaced, and Tyder, who weighs in with goals, can really, really come into their own. So Montreal Impact essentially could be better defensively. They keep a compact shape so that they're able to counter-attack at pace. They don't press massively so they can counter-attack at pace. When they do hit teams on the counter, like the Philadelphia Union game where they won 4-1, they can be absolutely lethal. So if they replace this guy and they learn how to defend a bit better, Montreal Impact really could be one to watch next season. Thanks very much for joining us. Your suggestions. So we put a community post out. There are a load of suggestions. Some of them are so niche. I was really, really delighted. We've got a player profile coming up that will confuse everybody. Having said that, it's an opportunity for you as members to make more suggestions. Please keep them coming in. As you see, we're very happy to tackle any kind of subject. So just get in on the community post. Tell us what you're interested in seeing. And thanks very much for joining us.